Not back, Lenny, none of us would go in the woods and give them a hard time. We're talking about things that shoot back. If it goes down now and stops giving me a hard time, I've won. And if it dies, it dies. If it lives, I'm even happier. I don't have a death on my conscience. Therefore, for anti-personnel ammunition, what we're recommending is something that will predictably stay inside the human body instead of exiting the other side, the opposite of what you need for hunting big game. You hear people say that never in history has anyone been hit by a bullet that went through someone else. That's a crock. That anyone who tells you that hasn't looked too damn far in the history books. You could go back into the last century. You'd find that McCall's bullet that murdered Wild Bill Hickok exited his head after passing through a lot of heavy bone and struck and severely wounded another man in the Deadwood Saloon. You would find that the bullet that killed Morgan Earp in the pool hall, subsequent to the OK Corral shooting, exited his body and struck another bystander, wounding him. In this past year, in the past 12 months before this filming, we have one police officer shot to death in Pennsylvania by bullets that passed through the body of the felon, fired by other officers, because the felon's body blocked the officer's view of their brother officer behind him. Officer Valentine was killed by bullets that had exited the suspect. You have one shooting here in the Los Angeles area of a highly touted bullet that would have lots of penetration, just what you need, folks. Trust us, it works on the gelatin, that passed through the felon, wounding him, and struck the innocent woman unseen in the darkness behind him, killing her. You have one in Arizona where the bullet passed through the body of the felon and struck and killed a campus police officer. That's 3 in 1 year, and those are just the ones I know of. And remember, there's no empirical database that collects them all. And Lenny, that's too big a price to pay. I want a bullet that will stay inside the body of the offender, where it will do the most disorienting, neutralizing shock, where it will the least endanger people on the other side. Many of your regular viewers are into sports shooting and have seen your fine videotapes on Bianchi Cup and Steel Challenge and all that. And they know the rules of safe shooting. And the first rule you learn when you ever go to a range is backstop. You never unleash the bullet unless you know where it's going to stop. None of those people who watch your videotapes would ever go to a shooting range that had a sign up and said, "Do not shoot armor-piercing ammo, it will go through the backstop," and then fire the armor-piercing ammo. What possesses them to go on the street where the only safe backstop is the body of the offender, and innocent people have to be presumed to be walking behind him, and use a bullet designed to penetrate 18 inches of solid flesh? I must profoundly disagree with that.
And so, hence, it's the hollow point round that you suggest.
We strongly recommend the hollow point. There are a lot of exotic rounds that are designed for extremely low penetration and wide destruction. But basically, some have problems in quality control, some have problems in design. One used to be superb, and the quality control and the design have since gone down the chute.
Is that the Glacier?
I'd rather not mention brands. And at this point, I'm just much more comfortable recommending a good conventional jacketed hollow point for the semi-automatic, semi-jacketed hollow point for the 357 Magnum, and lead semi-wad cutter plus P hollow point for the 38 Special.
Okay. In home shootings, in home defense, what happens there usually? What is there? What's the general rules? I mean, of safety. If I was preparing for home defense, what should I keep in mind if I were to confront?
I would keep in mind what we call at Lethal Force Institute the Alamo concept. Don't go looking for them. Force them to come to you where you're ensconced. Now, the Alamo might be a lousy example because we remember that all the defenders of the Alamo were killed. But what I'm looking at here is the fact that you had 188 raggedy-ass freedom fighters in that little San Antonio mission in 1836. You could have counted on your fingers the number that knew anything about even rudimentary military tactics. They were surrounded with a supply of perhaps 4 or 5 days' worth of food, water, and ammunition, and for 13 days stood off 6,000 of the most highly trained, battle-hardened troops in the Western Hemisphere. They did it because they were ensconced defenders. The others, to reach them, had to expose themselves, to come across the open plain into the rifle sights of the Texans and the Tennesseans. The Texans and the Tennesseans, certainly the others knew where they were, but the primitive artillery of the time could not effectively neutralize. The Mexican army had to charge forward and attack. By the time the Alamo had fallen, we don't have complete casualties. We do have the number of dead on both sides. On the San Antonio side, it was 188. On the other side, before, not counting the wounded, not counting the sick, not counting the missing in action, each of the defenders before they had fallen had killed 8.5 of the enemy apiece. I would submit to you that, first, there are not 6,000 scumbags outside your apartment waiting in line. They are not under the command of General Santa Anna, who was known to decimate his troops for reasons of discipline, that is, to at random shoot 1 out of 10 men in the company that he felt had displeased him and had not fought effectively enough. I would submit to you that long before the 8.5th has fallen on your staircase, the other side will have followed the advice of the great police instructor Arthur Lamb and reconsidered their negative attitude and left the situation. I think the big thing for the citizen to remember is don't try to be a hero, don't do a house clearing. Once you've called the police, don't try to grab the guy yourself. You've just contaminated the area. The police are now coming in expecting an armed man. Look, there's one now. Common sense, simple common sense. A lot of the things that we do, I'm not going to put on a videotape because neither you nor I can control a videotape. I can control the students who come to LFI, all of whom have to have total proof of criminal record and character background check. I will tell you this, our definition of tactics is very simple. It's common sense applied with a specific knowledge of the involved discipline.
You've talked about and written about distance, how important it is to maintain and keep your distance. And really what you said earlier here about the armed citizen in his house is not to go looking for trouble, just to stay your ground. How close, if you are threatened, can you let someone get to you before you really have the right, the ability, the fear to take that shot to protect your life? Is there a distance?
The doctrine at law is first measuring by the yardstick of the reasonable and prudent man. What would a reasonable and prudent person have done in the same situation, knowing what the defendant knew? The educated person has a whole lot better buffer zone than the average. Most people believe that for you to be enough of a danger to me with this knife, for me to be authorized in using my .45 revolver, or in this case Sig Sauer P220, you would have to be as close as you are right here. And by that time, we're both hemorrhaging all over the place, and I may or may not get the last laugh, but it's going to be a very hollow victory. The fact of it is, and there's no need to belabor the point here because your viewers can get the excellent tape that you offer, where I had the privilege of introducing Sergeant Dennis Tueller. It was Sergeant Tueller who in 1983 first quantified the fact that the average person, not an athlete, not a superstar on methamphetamines, but the average person can close 7 yards, 21 feet, and kill with a knife in 1.5 seconds or less. If the weapon is a longer weapon, a baton, let's say, or a crowbar, the time would actually be less. The longer weapon is the length of the arm, that much farther reach, one less step he would have to take. And if a man that distance began to move on me, I would start shooting at that point. The knowledge is power. You know, the more knowledge you have in this regard, the more defensible you are. I would urge anyone watching this tape to check Lenny McGill's catalog,